wood shop has 3 sanders, the first of which is this big monster here called an edge sander. It's just like your garden variety belt sander that you have at home, except here's the belt and it's 4 feet plus long. So the same idea applies. The belt moves in this direction. You hold your work against it on the table and it removes material at an astonishingly fast rate. So be prepared for the fact that this is going to take wood off pretty quickly. Even though it's, in this case, a 100 grit belt, it's going to remove material quite rapidly. So the safety considerations include, first of all, making sure the dust control system is on. And in this case, there's a blast gate here that we need to open. And like your belt sander at home, the belt needs to be adjusted for tension and for drift in this direction. So the tension is corrected with or adjusted with this big wheel. And we do it by touch so that it's moving about 1/2 to 3/4 of an inch away from the platen. That's approximately correct belt tension. And the tracking is adjusted with this hand wheel here after you turn the device on. Just like at home when you use a screwdriver to change the angle of this cylinder here, that adjusts the tracking of the belt in this case. Which direction does the belt move? You can tell that by looking at all the dings on the guard over here. That obviously means that pieces of wood have been grabbed by the belt and shoved this way, so the direction of the belt motion must be this way. So when we're in operation, I'll take my piece and hold it on the table and carefully move it into contact with the belt, keeping in mind that the belt is going to push it this way and I'll have to resist that motion. Some people like to clamp a piece of wood, a stop, right here to the table to prevent motion of the piece too far to the right. That's a good idea. So I'm going to energize the tool, first of all. And here's the on-off switch. After I turned the device on, you notice that the belt moved vertically just a little bit and then stopped. So the tracking is correct. In other words, the belt is in a stable position vertically, so there's no need to adjust it. If it doesn't do that, if it continues to rise or fall, correct that with small changes here. So we've got good tracking. In this case, we're ready to go. I notice before I start that the belt is somewhat dirty. In other words, there's this light colored material here represents small bits of wood chip or pitch or gum or maybe even some glue that has found its way into the interstices of the sandpaper. Now you're saying interstices. Now there's a $5 word for you. What does that mean? It refers to the spaces between the grains of sand that are glued to the sandpaper. So this actually is a cutting surface just like any other. In this case, the cutters are the little bits of grains of sand, and the extra dust is caught in the interstices. You can look that up on your Funkin' Wagnalls if you don't believe me. So we can clean up the sand, the belt to some extent with this marvelous tool called a sanding medium eraser. Turn on the device. You could see by systematically raising and lowering the eraser gently across the belt, I cleaned up a great deal of that accumulated material. It makes the belts last much longer and gives you a better sanding job. So it's worth cleaning the belt periodically as you're going. Now I've finally gotten to the point where I can use the sander on my work. So you could see how I gradually fed the work into the belt, trying to keep it parallel. so that I sand evenly all along the edge. And you probably noticed that there was dust coming out through these ridges and a lot of dust going that way. Direct evidence that we're removing quite a bit of material. And I can see already that this edge that I sanded is very much smoother than it was and quite straight, because the platen keeps the whole system straight with respect to making a parallel edge. A lot of material got removed in a very short period of time, and that's the thing to keep in mind. We can take a lot off quite quickly. Other safety issues have to do with the presence of what we call pinch points. And here's an obvious pinch point right here. If I got my hand caught in there, the motion of the belt is probably going to overcome my reaction to pulling it back. In other words, I'm going to get drawn in like this. Be very careful to keep any part of you away from a pinch point. Here's another pinch point right here. Again, keep your fingers away from that. And in fact, there's a pinch point around here. So don't be doing this, dropping your finger down in there. This particular tool is actually set up to be used on both sides. We haven't got it set that way because we don't have floor space, but it could be used by 2 people at once. This is our disc sander. And in this case, it's a large circular piece of sandpaper glued to a flat plate that rotates in this direction. So you bring your work against the sandpaper. It can also be used to do outside curves, convex curves. So you'd be going this way. And again, removes material relatively quickly. So be careful to keep in mind that it doesn't take much to remove what you want to remove. As far as safety issues go, here's an obvious pinch point. Anywhere along this interface between the disc and the table is a place you do not want your fingers to go, because you can get caught in there, and that's very bad news. There is also a similar pinch point underneath the table on the opposite side of the disc. So I can't imagine why you'd want to do it, but if anyone ever were to put their fingers back in here, they're at risk as well because of the presence of that pinch point. Use the table if you are sanding at an angle. In other words, this table can tilt in this direction, so you can do angles like that rather than holding it freehand at some angle to do your sanding. That's a general point that could be made for a lot of our tools. So this one is set to be at square to the disc, but it could be tilted all the way to 45 and give you very good results. So with the operation of this tool, we want to turn on the dust control, which means opening this blast gate, and energize the tool. And we're ready to go. The disc is a little dirty, so if I turn on the power, I can use my eraser. I was sanding the edge grain there, and you'll notice that at the outer end, there's a little burning. None over here. If you get burning at one position, try moving the work closer to the center of rotation. That's lower velocity for the cutting surfaces, those little grains of sand. You're less likely to get burning under those circumstances. This is our oscillating spindle sander. It's a rotating drum with the abrasive attached to it, rotating in this direction, but it also oscillates up and down. Gives you the opportunity to sand at our concave curve with relative ease, and you get to use the full width of the sandpaper in the process. This comes in comes with different sized spindles for different radius of curvature sanding. And there are different inserts to go with the different size spindles. A word about safety again. Here's a pinch point. So Be sure to keep your fingers away from the entrance to the insert. Best to keep them as far away as possible, but concentrate on never getting them in here because that's going to grab your finger. Maybe I should comment a little bit about changing these spindles. They should be on only hand tight, never more than that. In fact, the rotation of the motor tightens the threads, so you don't need to tighten these things any more than finger and hand tight. And that makes it easier to get them off for someone else. So, again, turn on the dust control by opening the blast gate. And you can see the spindle rotating in this direction and oscillating at the same time. So because it's rotating this way, you'll want to feed your wood counter to the rotation, which means like this. So you can see that I sanded a curve where there was none just by holding it in one place. If I had a concave curve to shape, this would do a very good job of bringing it into that position. And you can see that I'm bracing the piece with my right hand because the rotation of the abrasive is pushing it in this direction. So I'm resisting that. Now, as with all our power tools, the usual comments apply regarding protective equipment. Always wear proper eye protection. Hearing protection at your choice, maybe not so necessary with these tools. These two smaller sanders are not noisy, but they do make a lot of dust. They're wood atomizers. And it's important to realize that if you're sensitive to any of the woods that you work with, Western red cedar, some other species of wood are in that category, you may want to wear respiratory protection as well. We have various sizes and shapes of respiratory protection here, but you're welcome to bring your own if you wish and use them at your discretion.